or where she was living, he assured himself, but simply out of natural human curiosity. Although there was nothing particularly natural about the predicament he had got himself into just over 2 years earlier, he conceded sardonically, his lean, darkly handsome face tense with scornful recollection. While suffering from temporary amnesia, Gaetano had managed to marry a woman he had known for barely 6 weeks, a woman whom he knew virtually nothing about. Gaetano, prior to that act of inexplicable insanity, had been a playboy prince, notorious for his affairs and dislike of stuffy conventions such as getting married and maintaining a royally respectable low profile. So what the hell had come over him after that accident in the mountains? 2 years on, Gaetano was still struggling to answer that baffling question. And to underline the obvious mistake he had made in marrying the woman, his bride had deserted him at dizzying speed. Gaetano, the son of a mother who had abandoned him as a toddler, had little sympathy for lying, disloyal women who walked out on their responsibilities. That he should also have married the same sort of woman infuriated him, and it only emphasized how unsuitable the wife he had chosen had been. Most particularly a woman who had told him she loved him only hours before running away from him when he had needed her the most. Mosvacia was a small country on the Adriatic coast, which had been in meltdown for the first year of Gaetano's return home. Vittorio had had leukemia, but instead of the long, slow decline he had envisaged, Gaetano's older brother had died very suddenly from a heart attack. There had been no time for the careful training and transfer of power that Vittorio had planned for his little brother. No time for final goodbyes either. Even worse, there had been neither the space nor the privacy for Gaetano to grieve or freak out about the huge responsibility of the throne that had become his without warning. Gaetano had had to bury his personal feelings deep and keep it together for the sake of the Mosvacian people. Wild ideas like abdication had had to be firmly squashed when the streets had filled with candle-holding crowds mourning his brother's demise. Loyalty and respect for Vittorio's dutiful example had gripped him hard. He had toiled through the endless weeks of official mourning, the solemn state funeral rites, and his own subsequent coronation like an automaton, simply making the speeches and performing the duties that were expected of him in his new and unfamiliar role as monarch. Like the rest of Mosvacia, Gaetano had still been reeling in total shock because Vittorio had been the brightest jewel in the Mosvacian crown and an impossible act to follow. Furthermore, nobody had ever expected Gaetano to follow his sibling and end up as king. He was the second son, born from their father's brief second marriage, the literal spare to match the heir. 20 years older than Gaetano and already having ruled for almost as long, Vittorio had married at the age of 40. Everyone had assumed that an heir would arrive quickly after his marriage to Julia, only sadly, that long-awaited event hadn't happened, and then poor Vittorio had fallen ill. Only months into Gaetano's reign, senior courtiers had begun to hint that Gaetano should now consider finding a bride. He had thought about the runaway wife, who nobody but Dario knew he had, and he had duly redoubled his efforts to trace her and get a divorce. She had been impossible to find, with no social media presence. Suddenly, memory sliced in like a shot of lightning to throw his rational thought processes into chaos. He remembered a tiny woman with a mass of strawberry blonde hair and huge aquamarine eyes that dominated her delicate freckled face. A woman standing in front of a Christmas tree, covered with multicolored lights. She was smiling, always smiling at him as though he lit up her world.